We had this conversation before the show. Who is the most influential white athlete of all time? In the chat, I need your answer.
I want to see what they say.
Any sport.
I need your answer. Any sport. Not football, not exclusively football, not exclusively basketball. Who is the most influential white athlete?
While we're waiting for
Caitlin Clark.
Oh, she like 3. So she like, she top 3.
Wow. We putting
She
Caitlin
might be
Clark.
2.
Already.
No, she's 1.
Oh.
She's 1.
Damn, that question.
Boy.
What I'm saying,
Caitlin Clark, the most influential white athlete in all of history. Shady McCoy.
It only got to be white.
Someone just dared call Caitlin Clark the most influential white athlete of all time, right in a room packed with people who definitely weren't walking in as her biggest supporters. At first, the reaction was skeptical, even tense, like nobody was ready to let that claim slide without a fight. But as the conversation unfolded, something unexpected happened. One by one, the argument started fading, and by the end, no one in that room could push back with any real evidence. The debate opened with legends like Larry Bird and David Beckham being thrown into the spotlight, their influence carefully measured and compared. Yet somehow, as the discussion kept building, every road seemed to lead back to one name. It all arrived at the same place, the same conclusion, and suddenly the room felt quieter than before. Here's exactly how that moment unfolded. And when someone finally brought up Serena Williams, the respect in the room was undeniable. Serena was incredible for us. Truly incredible. The greatest.
Nobody.
Yo, you wasn't. You wasn't. He wasn't. Nobody's watching girls basketball. And then we get this girl like Steph Curry. Everybody watching. To this day.
To this day.
Women's basketball is looked at like the NBA, like the NFL.
Who do you think is the most influential white athlete of all time? And does Caitlin Clark belong in that conversation or above it? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Let's start with the question itself, because it is more interesting than it sounds on the surface. Most influential white athlete of all time. Any sport. And the conversation that followed went through Larry Bird, Michael Phelps, David Beckham, Conor McGregor, Tony Hawk, and eventually landed on Caitlin Clark. Not because someone was trying to make a point about race, but because when you actually apply the criteria, influence, cultural reach, changed behavior, moved the needle.
Who do you think is the most influential white athlete of all time? And does Caitlin Clark truly belong in that conversation, or somehow rise even higher above it? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Let's start with the question itself, because it turns out to be far more fascinating than it first appears on the surface. The most influential white athlete ever, across any sport. As the debate unfolded, the room quickly filled with legendary names. People brought up Larry Bird, then Michael Phelps, followed by David Beckham, Conor McGregor, and Tony Hawk. But somehow, as the discussion kept building and the arguments kept circling back, the conversation kept landing on one name again and again, Caitlin Clark. Not because anyone in the room was trying to force a point about race, but because when people honestly applied the real criteria, influence, cultural reach, changing behavior, actually moving the needle, one name kept quietly winning every single round of the argument.
You see, there's blocks where they're going to talk about Luka and they're going to talk about Caitlin Clark.
True.
Hey,
think about it. I like
Shady's
this point. Last point. The girl that should play at like I don't know, LSU or USC.
Yep.
She played at Iowa.
Yeah.
Y'all tripping. Caitlin Clark.
The problem is this, though, 2-5. Serena Williams.
Let's go through the candidates first, because the elimination process is actually the most entertaining part. Michael Phelps came up early, and the pushback was immediate and completely valid. Phelps is the most decorated Olympian in history. 23 gold medals. A swimmer so dominant.
Let's go through the candidates first, because the elimination process turned out to be the most entertaining part of the entire debate. Michael Phelps came up almost immediately, and the pushback that followed was instant and honestly completely fair. Phelps is the most decorated Olympian in history. 23 gold medals, a swimmer so overwhelmingly dominant that his presence alone forced people to rethink what the human body was even capable of doing in the water. But then someone asked a real question that shifted the entire room. Did he actually make you want to swim? Did kids all across America suddenly start begging their parents for pool memberships because of him? The uncomfortable answer was no. And the reason came down to something simple but powerful: infrastructure. Swimming requires a pool, and not everyone has access to one. Not everyone is heading to a public pool every week. The barrier to entry is high enough that even the greatest swimmer the world has ever seen could not fully turn that dominance into nationwide participation. Phelps was enormous, a legend by every measure. But when it came to pure influence, even his impact had very real limits.
In Ireland, some of
the
them are
most
in
influential
Scotland.
white athlete, though, point blank period, is David Beckham. They were not, bend it like Beckham. You know that, and you never watched a game of soccer in your entire life. Like that. Like he's got stupid.
You don't
on.
think David Beckham?
Bro, David Beckham was like.
I don't think so. I'm not saying he's a great guy. He's a great dude and looks nice. He got magazines. I'm cool with all that.
Who wants to play like Larry Bird though?
Not even Larry Bird, but I like
nobody.
David Beckham got a serious argument. And the person making it had a point. You could not watch a game of soccer in your entire life and still know who David Beckham was. Bend it like Beckham as a cultural reference. The hairstyles, the fashion, the relationship with Victoria, the crossover into pop culture that made him as visible in a magazine.
The conversation kept rolling, and when David Beckham entered the debate, the argument instantly felt stronger because the case for him was real. You never had to watch a single soccer match to know who Beckham was. Bend it like Beckham became a cultural phrase. His hairstyle sparked trends everywhere, his fashion choices dominated magazines, and his relationship with Victoria Beckham turned him into a pop culture fixture as much as a sports icon. He was one of the most globally recognizable athletes of his generation, known even by people who had never sat through a full 90-minute match. That level of visibility is genuine influence. But then the counterargument came just as quickly. In the United States specifically, where the size of the sports market tends to shape these conversations, Beckham's impact leaned more toward celebrity than the sport itself. He joined the LA Galaxy, brought huge attention with him. Yet soccer still didn't suddenly become a dominant American sport during his time there. The fame was massive, but the shift in participation or cultural sports habits never quite matched the hype. Then Larry Bird came up again and again, and nobody questioned his basketball greatness. 3 championships, 3 MVPs, 12 All-Star appearances, and that legendary rivalry with Magic Johnson that many believe helped revive the National Basketball Association in the 1980s. His influence on the professional game is undeniable, but someone pointed out something subtle that shifted the mood in the room. Kids weren't running around shouting that they wanted to be Larry Bird the way an entire generation later shouted about Michael Jordan. Bird was admired, feared by opponents, respected by everyone watching, but a wave of kids shaping their entire basketball identity around his style just wasn't as clear. He elevated the sport, but he didn't necessarily redefine who was entering it. Then the name Conor McGregor hit the table, and suddenly the room got loud again. McGregor's swagger crossed cultural and racial lines in a way very few white athletes ever have. The trash talk, the confidence, the magnetic personality that made people tune in even if they had never watched a second of MMA. Press conferences themselves became entertainment because he was holding the microphone. The Irish working-class background delivered with the confidence of someone who believed he was royalty resonated across audiences that normally had nothing in common. But the pushback was that McGregor's influence, while massive, lived inside a specific lane and a specific moment. He made MMA bigger, absolutely, but he didn't reshape the entire sports landscape around him. Then someone brought up Tony Hawk, and at first the room almost underestimated the answer until people started thinking deeper. Hawk didn't just dominate skateboarding. He pulled it from a niche subculture into the mainstream. Suddenly kids in suburbs, cities, and everywhere between wanted to skateboard. The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise alone introduced an entire generation to skate culture who might never have encountered it otherwise. Even the aesthetic ripple through hip-hop and street fashion years later, the skinny jeans, the skate-influenced style that artists like Lil Wayne embraced, could be traced back to the cultural wave Hawk helped create. You knew who Tony Hawk was even if you had never seen him land a trick. That's influence. And then, almost quietly, the conversation turned toward Caitlin Clark. The person who brought her up didn't come with charts or rehearsed numbers, just a simple question that hung in the air. Who is watching women's basketball now compared to 5 years ago? The answer felt obvious. Suddenly everyone was, or at least far more people than ever before. And the follow-up question hit even harder. Why? One player from Iowa who shoots like Stephen Curry, handles the ball with fearless creativity, and walked into the Women's National Basketball Association, turning arenas into sellouts not just for the Indiana Fever, but for opposing teams when she came to town. Road games started selling out simply because fans wanted to see her play. The league suddenly had to manage crowds at venues that had never dealt with that level of demand before. The numbers told the same story. When Clark played, people watched. When she missed time with injury last season, viewership dropped dramatically across the league. Not just for her games, but everywhere. Yet even then, the attention she created didn't vanish entirely because the interest she sparked had already spread. New television exposure appeared on ESPN. New investment and opportunities started forming, and the momentum kept moving even when she wasn't on the court. When the conversation shifted to Serena Williams, the room almost paused out of respect because Serena's influence on women's tennis is nearly impossible to overstate. She wasn't just dominant. For years, she was a sport. Players like Naomi Osaka and Coco Gauff grew up under the shadow and inspiration of her legacy. But the debate wasn't about greatness alone. It was about what kind of cultural shift an athlete created beyond their own victories. And that's where Clark's case started sounding different. Basketball already existed deep in the American sports conversation, already filling television screens and playground courts across the country. What Clark did was make millions of fans suddenly care about the women's side of that sport in a way they never had before. Casual fans now recognize names like Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Angel Reese, and Breanna Stewart because one player made them curious enough to pay attention to everyone sharing the court with her. The rivalry moments, especially with Reese during the 2023 College Championship, added fuel to that fire, creating a narrative that drew millions of viewers who had never followed women's college basketball before. By the time the debate reached its final moments, nobody was delivering a dramatic proclamation. It was more like a quiet realization spreading around the room. Other legends had undeniable influence, but if the question was which athlete reshaped the surrounding ecosystem the most, which one made a league feel newly visible, brought in fans who had never watched before, and sparked conversations that reached far beyond the court, the discussion kept landing in one place. The debate started with Larry Bird and ended with Caitlin Clark. And by the time it got there, nobody in the room had a convincing counterargument left.